Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Welcome to episode 7 of the Project Endure podcast. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and a very special guest from Missouri. Well, from California, in Missouri, Hannah Hutzley. Hannah, how are you?
I'm so good. It's so good to talk to you, Joe. And I just met you a couple weekends ago now. And dude, you're so stellar. I'm so glad I got to talk to you.
Thank you. Hey, I could say the same about you. And actually, nobody's ever described me as stellar before. So that's a first in real life and on the podcast. So thank you. But, I'm so happy to have you here. And anybody who's listening will understand very quickly why I'm so grateful that you're going to be sharing your story. But I kind of want to just throw the ball in your court and big picture overview. Who are you as a person? How would you introduce yourself?
Oh, man. I would say that I'm a very positive person. I know that's kind of a blanket term, but I feel like I truly am. I've definitely had some obstacles presented in my life, but I think I've stayed pretty peaceful and positive, and I just feel like I'm a very joyful person, and I like to encourage others, and I like to kind of tell people also in the same narrative that they're being a little bitch and they need to suck it up. And it's just I'm both of those people. I'm a very good listener, but I'm also very going to be like, hey, you're just making excuses kind of thing. Like you can do so much more with what you have, and yet you sit there and you focus on what you can't do. So I don't know, but I would say that, just I'm always smiling. That's what most people say. It's like a ball of sunshine.
I love it. And I think people will look at what you just said a lot differently after they hear your answer to this next question. But what I've been asking everybody who comes on the podcast is, what is the hardest thing or circumstance or situation that you've ever had to deal with in life? Meaning you didn't choose this thing chose you. What is that for you, Hannah?
Before I dive into that question, I think it's important to know about me is that I was the last born, so I was a baby. I had 2 big brothers that were 13 years older than me, so they also spoiled me rotten too and very protected me from a lot of things. I had 2 very loving parents who just took care of me and sheltered me. But I mean, as a parent, that's what you're supposed to do for your kid. You feel like that's your responsibility, is to protect them. And they did that. The school I went to was a K through 12. So most of my graduating class was people I had known since I was 4 years old. And I lived in a fairly small town, a desert town in California. So not a lot of adventuring. I definitely had a rebellious streak in me, but I hadn't tested it out a whole lot just yet. But the hardest thing. So also, I never lost anybody. I've never, there's so many things that my friends were going through that I saw them go through. And really that was hard for me. It was to see people I cared about go through terrible things. But then on October 27th, 2017, I was driving to work, and I worked at a gym at the time. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go in. I'm going to get a little bit of a leg day in before my shift starts. It's 2 p.m. It was a beautiful, beautiful day, just nice and warm and sunny. And when I was headed to work, it was only 8-minute drive. I was going to be there in no time. And I was taking this back road in my hometown, and this car had pulled out in front of me when I was going 50 miles per hour. And it's a 2-lane road. So I just went to the side to avoid hitting them. And when I went to the side, my Jeep hit a ditch and it started to roll. When it started to roll, I ejected out of the driver's side window because my seatbelt came unbuckled. I flew about 80 feet and I landed on my back. And I was paralyzed on the spot. But the only thing I remember from that is the car pulling out in front of me, and then everything went black. And I was laying on my back, and I opened my eyes, and I kind of phase in and out, but I really get them open, and it's just clouds, bed of clouds, and I'm just laying right there in the middle of it. And it's so vivid and beautiful. I mean, it's just like all these colors that they're not on earth. They're not on earth. And it's warm, and it just feels like home. And kind of looking around and enjoying this view, and I'm like, where am I? Like this is insane. This is beautiful. And it's so vivid, even more vivid than real life itself. And I kind of like look over, and there's two huge beaming lights that are blinking like eyes. And then a booming voice, a voice that is running through every bit of my body that I can feel, from my head to my toes. I can feel it in my legs. I can feel it like just in my heart. And I hear all is well, just clear and booming voice. And then 2 days later, I woke up in the hospital, and I wake up to this doctor telling me, hey, sweetheart, I'm so sorry, but you're never going to walk again. You were in a terrible accident. And it didn't even matter to me, because I just knew that everything was going to be all right, because the last thing that I remembered was God saying that all is well. So yeah, but the crazy thing is too, a lady saw it all happen, and she saw my Jeep, and her first thought was, whoever is in that Jeep is dead, because it was so crushed, and a piece of the framework had stabbed into the driver's seat. So if I had stayed in my vehicle, then it would have gone right through my chest, and there's no way I would have made it. So it's crazy, because I mean, I'm very adamant about my seatbelt. You can ask anybody. I'm always like, wear your seatbelt, wear your seatbelt. I was that way before. And for it to like come unbuckled, and to have that like divine intervention, and to think about so many things that happened in the accident too, of the car rolling. And while I was rolling, I perfectly ejected out of the driver's window without getting caught and being ripped apart, or without ejecting and then the car rolling on top of me when I ejected. And then to not land on my head, like I still get to be who I am because of how I landed. Like barbed wire caught me like a net, and I still have a scar right there from it. So it's like, it's crazy. There's so many things that it's not a luck thing. It's more than that.
Man, thank you for sharing that. That's I got the chills a couple times, and I've heard stories before, not firsthand, from people who have had near-death experiences, and described similar but different things to what you saw and what you felt and what you heard. And if you were to hear that from somebody else before it happened to you, would you believe that was the case?
I think, like, I mean, I've been a Christian my whole life, so I have often heard stories of like my grandparents are missionaries, so they used to go over to Africa, and they'd have people who had leprosy or just like all these crazy things, and then they'd pray, and a couple of days later they were healed, like things that they've had their whole life, and then they'd be healed. So having that foundation, I've always believed in divine miracles. But as far as it happening to someone who felt so ordinary, or someone that was, I would say even in that point in my life, I would feel extremely undeserving. And I still struggle with kind of like a survivor's guilt of hearing other people go through similar stories like mine, and they didn't make it, but I did. So it's like, there were just things that I was like, well, that wouldn't happen to someone like me or someone personal. That would just be something that I would see viral on the internet or something, you know what I mean? But I wouldn't see that personally. So for it to happen to you, there's just like a no denying kind of thing, that it's just like, that this is real, and that I truly believe that, honestly, at some point, like my injuries were a lot worse, or that I was dead. Like I kind of feel like maybe I had a very traumatic brain injury and I wasn't me anymore, or I was a quadriplegic, and like God kind of took what I could handle and gave it back to me. And you know what I mean? So, I mean, even I don't very often go into the very deep details like that. This is probably the 4th or 5th time I've ever done this. Because usually I just say, oh, it was an accident, and I saw Jesus say all is well. Like, but I don't go into like how I feel and everything, because like it feels the same, just like it happened moments ago, but it happened 4 years ago. And I think it'll always feel that way.
And so you're in the hospital and you wake up and this doctor says you're not going to walk again. what is going through your head aside from the fact that you know and you feel and you believe that all is well, right? You still have to figure out how you're going to live now. And so what are the next steps? What's going through your mind at that point?
I think initially it was just like a piece. It was just like, okay, I can figure this out. Like I've got the right people in my corner. And that's what I always say to people that are new to something like me. I'm like, you need to have the right people in your corner that are going to be honest with you about the cards you're dealt, but also aren't going to let you like lose yourself even more to the situation. So I knew that I had the right people and I had my family. And like, and after you go through something like that, that's all that matters. It's not your clothes, your car, your body, your anything, it's your people. And it's like I had those, and that's what mattered to me. So then it was a lot of rehab, inpatient rehab for the first couple months. And it was a lot of being on morphine and Percocet and being on these really heavy drugs because I had broken my back in 3 places. So I had a 10-hour surgery and I still have rods in my back. I have a huge scar. And it's just, it was like crazy because I had that surgery and I think a week later they had me sitting up and they're trying to do, x-rays and everything. And it's just all that pain. So lots of Percocet and all the good stuff. But then it's therapy, like 8 hours a day. You have occupational therapy, you have physical therapy, you have just all the therapies. And I mean, you have nurses that are teaching you how to be independent again and all these, it's a lot of information overload that you don't fully know how to apply to your life just yet because you're not back into the normal stride of things. So then it's like, okay, once I got discharged, that's when shit really hit the fan because I was like, okay, now I'm back in my daily routine and it looks nothing like it used to. And I was very much so living, I don't know, I wouldn't say that I was like this all over the place kid, but I was definitely a person that was like, I have 1,000 more tomorrows, so I can figure it out. It'll be all right. But then it's like, okay, now I have to rethink everything. I really have to not let this whole thing go to waste. And I need to find the purpose within this because I know it's there. I just haven't found it yet. And take each day one step at a time because it's not going to just be an overnight thing of like, oh, figured out, have my happiness again, I'm good to go. But it's months of suffering and hard work and just heartbreak and grieving. But if it wasn't like that, then the lessons wouldn't be as clear. And that's what matters is not seeing something that looks so hellish, just let it be hell. You have to like let this hell be an opportunity and let these obstacles actually become stepping stones to be the person you always wanted to be.
Man, I just love every word of that. And, I am going through something that's way different, but it's a struggle nonetheless. And I have a genetic eye condition where I'm losing my sight and eventually leading me down a path toward blindness. And I'd say the first 24 years of my life, that was a huge burden for me. And when I met my wife and really came to faith in Jesus was when that all shifted for me and that burden became a blessing. And it's just amazing how you can be in a really dark place for a long time even. And then something happens or circumstances change and you realize that you actually weren't buried, but you had been planted. And that's how I feel about life. Like I literally just recorded episode 6 with Grace, another BPN ambassador. And I shared this quote. So if you're listening to this podcast, I apologize for the repeat quote, but it goes, sometimes when you're in a dark place, you think you've been buried, but you've actually been planted. And I just feel that so much in my life. And I can see that in your life, but it almost sounds like you were never fully buried because as soon as that darkness started to creep in, there was also this overwhelming light that was just overpowering it. And so for you, as now you've gotten further away from the accident, just over 4 years, what are some of the hard lessons that you've learned through that process of reintegrating into life?
Oh, that's a very good question. I would say that it really shifted my perspective as to what's actually a problem now. What's actually worth fretting over, what's actually worth bitching about, what's actually worth like my peace over. And I realized, oh, hey, 95% of the stuff that I worried about day to day doesn't even fucking matter. It really doesn't. And that's often something I tell to so many people. I'm like, 95% of your problems is because you have a shitty mindset. And once you see that, your whole life will change, because you start to worry about stuff and you're like, bigger picture, this doesn't matter. Bigger picture, this isn't going to matter even tomorrow. Why am I letting, and I like see that so much. People just become such negative people because of all these little things that add up throughout their day. And that's what they choose to focus on. So anyway, that was one of them. And that was definitely like a tough pill to swallow, because I think a lot of my identity was in bitching and complaining about stuff and just trying to talk about stuff and be like, yeah, I feel this way. Don't you feel this way? And then they're like, yeah, you know what? Fuck yeah. You know what I mean? And it's just like this little dumb spiral of just negativity. So that was a big lesson to learn. And I think independence, learning how to drive again was a long process. And I had to start that like 8 months in advance before I was actually able to drive again. It was almost a year, that first year anniversary to the date, that I was able to drive on my own again. And that was just months and months and months of process. And there's also a lot of screening that goes into that to make sure you're not PTSD or anything, or that you're not going to freak out. Because that first lesson that they have you is with an occupational therapist. And it's like, they're kind of just watching you to see if it's just going to trigger a memory, because, you know, I didn't remember anything other than when the car pulled out in front of me. So they're kind of just waiting. Everything was fine. But then it's like, there's just so much independent stuff, and going shopping and needing to humble yourself and ask for help. I'm a very independent person, and I don't like to ask for help. I don't like when I get pity. And that's something that people do to you all day long, especially since I'm a young girl in a wheelchair. They're going to be like, oh my God, her life is over, that poor thing. And it takes a lot of me to be like, nah, you know, this isn't hard. Not being in a wheelchair isn't hard, but do you know what is hard? That shitty mindset. That's what would be hard. And I'd rather have this than have that. So, you know, so that's another thing too. And it's dealing with people that are out there and strange, and, you know, they're treated differently. And that was weird, because it's like, you know, being 19 years old and thinking that, oh my gosh, everybody's looking at me, and looking back, it's like, no one's looking at you. They do now, but you know, they never did. So it's also learning how to be kind of like the center of attention, and not a good like light, I would say sometimes. So there's just a lot of knowing what a problem is, independence, and realizing that nothing is as hard as I thought it was before.
Yeah. I have a story and then a question for you. So I went on a service trip to Guatemala in 2018, and we were providing physical therapy. It was 2018. We were providing physical therapy services to underserved areas in remote regions of Guatemala. And I remember waking up one morning and my iPhone hadn't charged because the electrical outlet wasn't great or whatnot, but I was upset. I was frustrated about it. I was in a terrible mood. We took a bus ride a couple hours to a remote village, dirt roads, no running water, no electricity. We went on a house visit to see this young boy who had muscular dystrophy. He was in a wheelchair. He was probably 10 years old, and he maybe weighed like 50 pounds. And he was just emaciated, covered in burns because their house had caught on fire and he was stuck in it. And we gave him this little toy Hot Wheels car, and it was missing a wheel. It had 3 wheels. We gave it to him to play with. And I'd never seen somebody so happy before in my entire life, living under a tin roof in those conditions with his circumstances. And I was just like, all right, I've got nothing to complain about. Absolutely nothing. And so my question for you, which is maybe a little bit of a tangent, is I don't think a lot of people know how to act around somebody who's different. And so, for example, right, if you were to just like give a little monologue to somebody listening to this podcast who comes across somebody who maybe has some kind of visible disability, or somebody who is in a wheelchair, or somebody who's not like them, I mean, how do you want somebody to interact with you?
I think it's as simple as just like talk to me like you would anybody else. It's not this. And I know that's very overheard, but people don't understand. Like I notice right off the bat when someone's going to treat me different before they even like open their mouth. because of how they're about to approach me. Just walk up to me. You don't have to like kneel down to my level. Like, I don't know, that's just my preference. You don't have to like act like I'm a kid and like having to get down to my level. Like, I'm an adult. Like, I can still, like, I can look up to you. You don't have to do that to me. I think a lot of time too, people feel like they can just ask me whatever the hell they want. And I think I am an open book, and it's like, they're lucky it's me because I can talk about whatever. But at the same time, it's like, you can't just talk to anybody about what happened to them, because sometimes it's extremely traumatizing for them to talk about what happened.
Yeah.
And you could be like in the middle of Walmart and being like, hey, let's go back to this really traumatic event that you had that you have to go through all on, whatever it is. And like, tell me at 9 a.m. when you were just trying to get some bread. And you're just like, all right. So I think it's just like, I feel like a lot of times people think that they have to like go out of their way to like talk to me too, to be like, oh, I'm gonna make that girl's day because I said hey to her. It's like, no, like, we know that you're doing that out of a pity thing. Yeah. Or like a lot of times people are like, I'm gonna be praying for you. I know you're gonna walk again. That is so harmful, because it's like, what if there's other things that you should pray for me? There's a million other things I'd rather have prayed for in my life. And like, being able to walk again is so low on that list. It's like, pray for my loved ones and their health and their safety, pray for peace for me, or pray for this job. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so many other things to who I am. And like, being able to walk doesn't prevent me from being who I am and having a fulfilling life. So I think just talk to me normally. Yeah, it's different thing.
That's such a great teachable moment. I appreciate you sharing that. And one of the things that I think about often is the initial instinct for me, at least in my personal experience of dealing with something hard that I didn't ask for, is to ask the question, why me? And why can't I just be like everybody else? Why did this have to happen? And I think the better question to ask is, why not me? And I think adversity is such a cool opportunity to be a blessing for somebody else. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, because it's so clear from my perspective how much of a positive impact you've had on so many people. Is that something that you consciously think of about how you carry yourself, how you live, or is that just you?
I feel like initially the months that I was in the hospital, because before, I'm a very bubbly, very positive person. That's just been me, definitely more so in the last 4 years. But like, when I would see people come into the room and they're seeing me for the first time, I could see the worry on their face of like, is this still going to be Hannah? Like, is she going to be pissed off? Is she going to be mean? Is she going to be bitter? Like, all these things. And then I'd crack a joke and be like, why do I look better than you? I just was an accident. It's just like that kind of thing. And they'd be like, oh my God, like, it still hurt. So I think initially I was still being me, and that was healing for me to do, to still crack the jokes and be dark and whatever. But at the same time, I think I was like more so doing that for other people too, because I didn't want them to hurt because I was hurting. I just wanted to see them be happy, because I'm still me is what helped me heal. So it was kind of like a give and take. But I think more recently, it's just been, I've been focused on these characteristics I've strived for. And it's just kind of like a domino effect of, I strive to be a positive person who's happy and doesn't give a shit about of the cards I was dealt. I'm still going to make something great. I got shitty lemons, but I'm still going to make some pretty killer lemonade. And people, they see that, and that's kind of just like a ripple effect. Like, that's a cool bonus. And being that person is, people want to be that, or oh my gosh, I can't tell you how much I cried happy tears when the podcast came out for the Bear performance. I got hundreds of messages of people saying similar situations, or like, whatever. And each one is so powerful. And it just is like, man. And it goes back to that, like, there were so many moments. Not like an everyday thing, but there was definitely some really low, heartbreaking moments that I look back on. And I was just like laying there, like all alone in a hospital bed on my own for like one of the first nights since I was injured. And I'm laying there, and I'm bawling my eyes out because I'm confused. It's just in those moments you ask, why me? Why me? Why me? I was a good kid. I'm young. Like, there's so much more life. And why does it have to look like this now? And I have said this so many times, but I mean it. if I could go back, I wouldn't go back to make sure the accident didn't happen. I would go back and I would read and play these messages that I got. And I would read it to me when I was laying in the hospital bed, because I'd be like, you see how much good is waiting for you? And it's not going to be waiting for you if you take away this opportunity. So and I would read them. And I think that would be like, I know it'll never be able to happen, but that would just be such a cool moment, just to see hurting me and see all the good that came from the hurt.
Yeah, man. I usually save this question for near the end, but it just feels so right in this moment. If somebody is listening to this podcast and maybe they are in a similar situation to where you were, or maybe they're going through something completely different, but they're confused, they're lost, they feel alone, they're in a dark place, what would you say to that person who's listening? You're speaking to one person. What would you say to them?
I would say that there is so much good waiting for you. And I know that it seems really dark right now, but I promise you that this darkness is going to turn into the biggest light that you can't even like wrap your head around. It's not as dark and horrible and life ending as it seems. It's really a hidden blessing. But the thing is, you have to let it be that, because whatever you decide, if you want it to just be this end of your life kind of thing, then that's what it's going to be. You have to wake up and you have to choose what you think about it. Like, you choose what to eat. You have to force yourself to think of this as a good thing. So, and eventually one day you'll wake up and it just will be, you'll just be the happiest you've ever been. And you won't ever think twice about trying to go back and making sure, like, I mean, that's the thing, like, oh, would you go back and change it, or would you go back and make sure it didn't happen? And you would think, fuck no, that was the best day of my life.
Wow.
Best day of my life.
Wow. I did not expect you to say that, but that is, I mean, incredibly powerful and moving. I'm curious what your answer would be if somebody came back to you and said, I just don't believe that everything happens for a reason. And I don't know if you were ever in that place, but I think there are people who don't have that same faith or that same belief or trust that everything's happening on purpose for a purpose. And I'm curious, like, what is the message to those people? Does your message change to those people?
Not at all. I think if you do have that moment, or those moments when you are asking yourself, like, the why me, I encourage you to look forward or look for the moments in your life for why. That's why this happened, because there's been a few small handful, but a very powerful days that I've had where I'm sitting there with one person or a group of people or whatever. I mean, Ambassador Weekend is a great example of that, where I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is why me. This is why me. Because if that didn't happen, if my accident and all the hell I went through did not happen, I wouldn't be here amongst legends now. And I wouldn't be, even like the me before wouldn't be worthy of the people I'm amongst now. And you just you have to look for those moments. Sometimes they hit you without you looking. It's so easy to like just do the why me question and then to never look for the why you. Because if you're going to ask yourself those are very powerful questions, and then you never try to look for those answers within your life, and you're still focusing on the negative, then you're always just going to feel like shit for not having the why me. But I guarantee you've had moments as to why it was you, whether you know it or not. There's so many people that you have touched that you have no idea. There's so many people I've touched that I have no idea, because of someone that I moved, they moved another person and another person and another person. And I think that when we get to heaven, we'll get to see that. But until then, you just got to trust that there are many, many, many why you moments, whether you see them or not.
Yeah. That's really powerful. Now, we've been talking about this hard thing that happened to you. You didn't choose this thing originally. And one of the other questions I'd love to get your input on is, what is the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose?
I would say So I had my first anniversary date, and I didn't really know what to do about it. I didn't know what emotions were going to come up. I didn't know if I was just going to go into a spiral for a day or weeks or whatever. And I kind of just sat around the house all day. And I mean, I was with my good friend and she was awesome. But then at the same time, I was like, I hated that. I hated just being around all day, thinking about it all day, and like just feeling like it was a waste almost. So then on the second year anniversary, I was like, we're doing something, and we're gonna do something big. So I did a Spartan race on the anniversary date of my accident. I went to Dallas, Texas, and I did a 5-mile obstacle course, and it had, I think, 25 obstacles. And I was with a group of veterans, and we ran that race, and I wore the shoes that I was wearing when I was in my accident, because I think it's so important too. If you do have something like that, that's like, oh, I was wearing that when this awful thing happened, do something good in them and don't let that be the last thing that happened in those. So it's crazy. Even on those shoes, there is a cut through them that aligns perfectly with the scar that I have on my foot because it like got all messed up. But I got those shoes and I put them on and we did that race. And that was another why me moment, because I met incredible people. And it's like the fact that I'm still here and I can still do hard things and I can still push my body and love on my body and still allow it to go through hell. You know what I mean? It's just like, I still have that ability to do so. I have the ability and I'm willing and I'm able to do that. And it was just like, I could live that day over and over again because it just brings me so much joy reflecting back on that day. I would say that just the obstacle course. And it was cool because then that ended up qualifying me for the international Spartan races. And I was on ESPN in Vegas and like, you know, and it was in the desert, and that was even harder because a wheelchair in the sand isn't the best. But yeah, so it was just cool. It's another ripple effect of like, okay, like you get to go through hell, but you also get to reap the reward of that if you allow it. It's another thing. It's like, even if you have this huge thing that feels like it's way out of your control, you can still control how you react to it. And I know that's something that's hurt a lot, but it's people get into these moments and they forget that. They forget like, wait. I can choose to move forward and carry on, even though I'm hurting. I can still go for it. I can put even one step today, and that's better than just staying stagnant. So.
Yeah, I love it. And there's a Viktor Frankl quote that I'm probably not going to be able to pull up in time unless I can string out this sentence really, really long. But Google is loading, and here, I got it. It's loading. Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." And I just hear that over and over and over again in your story. And I think it's a message that the world needs to hear, to be quite honest, because as you alluded to earlier, people complain about a whole lot of stuff that doesn't matter at all. And I had this conversation with a good friend, Danny Jimenez, and we were talking about kind of when you die, right? You have a tombstone, and on the tombstone, there's your birth date, there's your death date, there's a dash in between. And all of the things that happen to us in life just fit into that dash. And the only thing that gets left behind is the impact that we had on other people. And I just thought it was such a powerful way to put things in perspective, because, you know, the job that you didn't get, or the test that you failed, or the shoes that you got really muddy and you didn't want them to get dirty, right? Like, none of that matters. None of it matters. And I think like your story is the perfect way for people to hear about somebody who's been through something challenging and still chosen that positive perspective. And so with that, Hannah, I want to ask you a question about the word endurance. You know, this is the Project Endure podcast. People tell me that I say that word wrong, by the way, endure. When I say it into my phone, like sometimes I'll use voice to text, it comes up as indoor, Indoor. So I guess it's the Project Endure, if I said that right. But anyway, it's about endurance. It's about thriving for a long period of time, despite setbacks, despite circumstances. And so to you, what does the word endurance mean?
For me, it's so much more than just a sport word. Like I think about, if I was to think about what that word meant when I was in high school and playing soccer, I would think about endurance training. I would think about running over long periods of time and building that up, and so you can be a better athlete. But now I think about how I apply that to my mental state, and how I think that it's more so, okay, showing up when you don't feel like it. It's like on the days that I don't want to go, those are the days that I need to go. And there's so many times when I haven't wanted to show up somewhere, and that ended up being one of the best days of my life because I met the right people and I got to, I don't know, just collide with someone I wouldn't have otherwise. But yeah, it's about going when you have nothing left in you, and showing up for yourself. Because do you know how many people wish that they could show up for themselves still, that aren't here with us anymore? Or, someone that doesn't have that opportunity to even go running or something like that, go for a fucking run. Do you know how badly I wish I could go for a run? And just stand up and to go into your car and drive in 10 seconds. For me, it takes about 4 minutes now. And I know that's like kind of like a weird thing, but it's like, there's just simple little things in your everyday that people take for granted. And it's like, do you know how many people wish that they could do that? Like, to even stand up and go to your stove and put a pan on there and crack an egg and let it stir and whatever, and add the seasoning, and then to get a plate down and do that. There's so many people that wish that they could do that, and yet you take it for granted. I promise that if you can just look for the little things in your life, even when it all seems dark, you can kind of just focus on your abilities and the people you have in your life, then you'll end every day happy. But for me, yeah, it's definitely just like, I think about when I was in therapy, and there was so many times where I just didn't want to show. It was like the first maybe 2 months after I had was in outpatient therapy, and I was just like, what's the point? What's the point? I'm not going to be able to run again. Well, what's the point? And then I was like, that's so dumb, Hannah. Do you remember like wishing you could even go to therapy? Because when we were moving and stuff, we just had some issues, and it's like, why are you taking this for granted? Or there's people that are all across the world that are hurting or have something similar like me, or whatever it may be, and they don't have the access to medical care like I do, and yet I'm just kind of throwing that away. So it was like, go, you need to show up for yourself. This is what proves, I don't know, it proves where legends are born in these moments of like not wanting to go, but you're doing it anyway because you have the ultimate goal of being better or working on your mentality or whatever it may be. So
yeah,
it's something that I've, like, when I was applying for BPN and just thinking about what Go One More meant to me, it was go one more, because there will be a day without a doubt that you wish you could even go one at all. So that's kind of what gets me going for, as far as like an endurance, maybe like Kickstarter, is like, there's going to be a day when I wish I could, even now, where I'm like, that I wish I could do this, that I could, pick up a weight, or that I could pick up my dog or whatever. There's going to be a day where I can't do that anymore. And I'm going to wish that I could, and I'm going to be wanting to kick old me because I didn't take advantage of those opportunities. So that's what it is. It's turning those shitty situations and actually making them these incredible opportunities. It doesn't need to just be a shitty situation. It can be so much more.
Yeah. I have this weird, I don't know if I would call it an ability, but I have this just empathy that sometimes it consumes me. And so one of the things that really affects me is when I see a really, really old person or an old couple, like a cute old couple walking down the street, like hobbling down a sidewalk. It makes me so sad to see two people that close or closer than me to the end of their life. And I don't know what it is, but it's almost like I'm transported there in that moment when I'm thinking about it. And I can feel almost what it might feel like when I realize that I don't have too many days left to do all of the things that I can do today. And I think it's really easy to lose sight of the fact that life can be taken from us at any moment. I mean, if we're going through something hard in this moment, it's still something to be grateful for, because of the sheer fact that we might not get to do it tomorrow. And the fact that we're alive is such a blessing. So you made me think of a Mike Tyson quote. He said, discipline is doing what you hate to do, but nonetheless doing it like you love it. And I think for you, I heard that in your definition of endurance, but instead of just doing something like you love it, it's actually like doing things and loving them because you get to do them. And it's just this, it's gratitude, right? And then the other thing that I thought of was a quote by Hunter Thompson, who said, life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather a skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride. And I don't know, I see you living that out every day, and it's really inspiring. And so, as we kind of close things down and wind down here, I'm curious for you, Hannah, like what's next? Where do you see things going in the next, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years for yourself?
Honestly, to dream big, Paralympian.
Wow. What event? I love it.
There's many that I'd be interested in. I think the skiing or mountain biking or murder ball, which is rugby. Yeah, for wheelchair users. Tennis. I mean, there's just all of it. Anything with the track, like the 4x4 or like the racing. I mean, just I'm such an athlete at heart, and that's still there. So that is my big aim for the moon kind of dream. But at the same time, it's like the one that is equally as important to me is the legacy and leaving that on as many people as I can, because it's like all too often I see people who are fucking around with their life and fumbling it and not taking it seriously and focusing on the wrong things. And it's just like, I wish I could just shake every single person that I see like that and be like, wake up, wake the fuck up, because this could all be over in seconds. And you don't see that, and you're messing around, and you're just ruining your life slowly. And it's painful to see, because I'm like, I don't even know. It's like, it's all going to just slip away. And then you're going to have all this regret because you didn't appreciate what you had. And that's the biggest thing. I feel like one of my biggest mission statements is you shouldn't have to lose something in order to know the importance to you. So like with whatever it may be a person or a function in your body, a job, an ability, whatever it is, that applies to absolutely every single thing in life that matters. And you shouldn't have to lose that to know. And it's like, I mean, how often do you see people that are like, I wish I would have said this to them. I wish I would have told them what they meant to me. I wish I would have ran that. I wish I would have done that. I mean, you hear it all the time. You hear regret every single day. And it's like, you hear people say those things, and it's like, that's what they focus on and what they didn't do. And it's like, okay, well, that sucks. But what are you doing now that you're going to regret a couple of years down the road because you didn't take advantage of what you had now? Okay. Like, you need to, people say these things and they have these lessons, and it's like, okay, you clearly know what that regret feels like, yet you're not doing anything about it in your life now. What about your spouse or your kids or your parents or whatever it is? Don't be too late. Because it's not going to be like a maybe thing. It's going to happen. Don't fuck around with your life. You got one. Don't be an idiot.
Oh, mic drop, man. I mean, I don't know how we could possibly add any more value than that, but I do want to add, one thought that I've been having quite frequently, and that's that who we're becoming is more important than who we are in this moment. And I think that can, strike people in a way where they're like, I don't know, I don't agree with that. But I think the way I see it is, right, every single second we're making decisions, whether it's just you and I sitting here, the words that are coming out of my mouth, the way that you're sitting in your chair or blinking your eyes, right? Those are all things that at some level are happening and changing who we are. I know that sounds weird, but stick with me. And so for that reason, knowing that every decision we make changes who we are, we're constantly changing. And every second, every minute, we're a different person, no matter in how subtle of a way, than we were in the previous second or the previous minute. And so to me, I think people get hung up too often on like, oh, like, I don't like who I am, or like, oh man, like I didn't go to the gym today, or I didn't do this, or like I'm such a bad person, I'm just gonna like throw this day away, or I'm just gonna stay like this because, why change? And who we're becoming is so much more important than who we are in this moment, and we get a say in that. And I think that's what you're trying to express here, is like, we can take control of how we see life and how we respond to it. And like, I'm not as like, I don't curse, but I have nothing against it, by the way. So I feel like I can't drive home the point any more than you did, but I agree wholeheartedly. And I think for anybody listening, the takeaway for me really is like, it's not about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to it. And your response is entirely within your control. And so, Hannah, with that being said, I mean, is there anything else you want to tell somebody who's listening to this podcast?
Man, I would say that happiness has nothing to do with what you have, and everything with how you value the people around you. It's not about the things, it's about the people. And that's where life really begins, is when you see that. So, yep. And thank you for this, dude. This is crazy.
Oh, you're so welcome. Well, Hannah, before we close out, where can people find you if they would want to reach out or want to connect? Where should they go?
Oh, I just have my Instagram. So How I Marry Hannah. If you want to find me on there, you can search Hannah Hutzley as well. You'll find me on there. But I'm the most present and honest on there. So
I could attest to that. Hannah, thank you so much for sharing your story and for your time. We'll have to get back for round 2 at some point in the future when you're on the Paralympic stage.
I'm down.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. Oh, and one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.